Hello, folks. Thanks for joining. My name is Timothy Ingalsbe. I'm Executive Director of Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, and Ecology. And the title of my presentation is Fanning Flames or Blowing Smoke, Communicating Clearly About Resource Benefit Objectives and Suppression Firing Operations. And I'm going to make an argument that we need to create and use new language that promotes the integration of fire ecology in fire management and language that facilitates increased beneficial fire use. Coming from a couple assumptions. First of all, fire adapted ecosystems, fire dependent species need more fire to mitigate past fire exclusion, as well as to adapt to future climate change. A significant amount of fire use happens during fire suppression operations that lacks inclusion or acknowledgement of resource benefit objectives. And I'll talk a little bit about some research I've done on that. And finally, the assumption is that the dominant fire exclusion, fire suppression paradigm is giving way to a new paradigm of fire resilience or fire regeneration. But this new paradigm is emerging, but not yet ascended here. So first of all, a little bit of ecological realism. Is no surprise to anyone here at the Fire Congress. The land needs more fire, and something that needs to be communicated effectively to the public. Large wildland fires are natural, necessary, and inevitable. But despite the widespread perception of an overabundance of wildfire, in fact, we have a historic fire deficit. And for a number of reasons, even many that go beyond this presentation, more fire, not less, may be the means of enhancing resilience to climate change and increasing wildfire activity influenced by climate change. Of course, we have a social problem. Nearly all wildfires are aggressively attacked, even the majority of fires in wilderness areas. So many opportunities for fire use for resource benefits are being squandered in this attack all fires policy. Now, it may not be policy on paper, but it pretty much is policy in practice of just aggressively suppressing nearly all fires. So Fusey argues that we should be more selective and strategic with aggressive suppression, focus on protecting homes and communities while applying more prescribed fire principles in wildfire response. So another social problem is where there's some fire, there's smoke. And wildfire smoke is a very visible pollutant. It draws a lot of public and particularly air quality regulators' ire, which often quashes opportunities to use fire. But while wildfire smoke plumes are very visible, this one's soaring above the Hollywood sign in Burbank. The invisible greenhouse gas pollution continues to soar, and that's more of an issue, in my opinion, both from the climate change perspective as well as an air quality argument, but wildfire smoke is more visible. So here's another ecological realism. Along with a fire deficit, we have a smoke deficit. And this is some early research by Bill Leanhoutz showing that while the amount of air pollution from transportation or industry or agricultural sources have gone up, up, and up, that from wildfire has been relatively flat. That's what's circled in red. And that along with, the decline of wildfire smoke has been 3 to 6 times more acres should burn annually, 48 times more biomass should burn on average annually, 6 to 9 times more smoke should be emitted from those fires that would have, could have, and should have burned. So it's a classic case of environmental trade-offs. Two environmental goods: protect air quality, that's good, protect from smoke, or protect communities or ecosystems with fire. And so one of the inconvenient truths is that there are few fire-free forests and almost no smoke-free fires that I know of. So one of our messages is managing fire may be the best means for managing smoke. And we try to get that. So I've argued a paradigm shift is emerging. And as part of this paradigm shift and a gestalt shift in perception, we need new language that will facilitate change in perceptions, beliefs, and behaviors associated with wildfire. And so words matter. And words from the old fire management terminology are, the part of the old paradigm of making war against wildfire. So it's this militaristic discourse of firefighting, initial attack, firefighters, and fire prevention and suppression, as if that's absolutely possible. The new paradigm would be creating new words or redefining old words to have new meanings. So it'd be more like working with wildfire. Instead of firefighting, perhaps fire guiding. Instead of initial attack, initial action, which is more open to a range of possibilities. And I'll argue later on, instead of firefighters, perhaps call them fire rangers. And change from fire prevention to preparation, from fire suppression to fire management. These new words open up new possibilities, and particularly new possibilities for more fire use on the land. So a brief tour of the history of various fire use terms and their acronyms. And in several cases in the last year or so, recent fire management workshops or webinars, I've heard this phrase, woo-foo, or whatever the heck we're calling it these days, it meaning fire use. And so there's a lot of confusion, not just amongst the public and the media, but even within our own community. What the heck are we calling it these days? So 2009 was an important policy document that did guidance for implementation of federal wildland fire management policy, birthed in the first month of the Obama administration. But the original term was prescribed natural fire. It had an acronym, PNFs, but it was widely called "let it burn" in the news media. I think this was a journalistic phrase. It never really existed, but that's a tough sell. Just let wildfire burn unfettered across the landscape. The public really didn't buy it, even though the term prescribed natural fire was pretty evocative of what it was intended to be. The next permutation, wildland fire use for resource benefits. WFERBs, I've heard it called online Furbies, pretty verbose. It was shortened quickly to wildland fire use and became pronounced by crews as WUFU, which has issues, I suppose. And then later on, it was appropriate management response. I've heard it pronounced AMR. We're going to hammer that fire. Reminds me of hammer that fire. But the problem with appropriate management response was a little bit tautological. It could mean anything and everything. The appropriate management response was any response management deemed appropriate. And so it really failed. It was the most probably objectively neutral term, but failed to really convey what we're doing and why. After 2009 came new acronyms, managing fire for multiple objectives, or MIFMO, but MIFMO evokes mumbo jumbo, and it's still not that clear. I saw it expanded to managing wildfire for resource objectives and ecological purposes, or MEROPE, but that either the phrase itself or the acronym will get you pretty tongue-tied, not that functional. More recently, people, I think out of frustration, are just calling it managed wildfire, which really doesn't have any acronym, or at least I've seen it phrased this, WTF. But aren't all wildfires managed in one way? So how do you convey fire use as part of wildfire management? We're still lacking that. I've graphed the terms in declining clarity over time. Perhaps prescribed natural fire was the most clear, but it's the oldest term. And as each new permutation of these terms for fire use and their acronyms have become less and less clear what exactly is going on, what are your intentions, goals, actions. And so it's one thing to confuse the public, it's another thing to be confused ourselves in the fire management community. So lo and behold, this recent document, just barely a month old, has resurrected the term prescribed natural fire. And I don't know where this is coming from. Is this a recognition that maybe that original term was most clear? Or was it something about CAL FIRE being way behind the curve and coming out with prescribed natural fire, not realizing it's about 2 decades or more outdated, but it's encouraging. So just about every fire cache I've ever worked in has this sign hanging up somewhere. But it doesn't say for firefighting only, it says fire use only. Fire use is staring us square in the face. And I'm going to argue that fire management wrongly assumed to be about mostly fire suppression. It's about fire use. But there's three kinds of fire use: prescribed fire use, suppression fire use, and restoration fire use. And our goal should to be integrating the three kinds of fire use in multiple objectives in fire management. So the great paradox is prescribed fire use is the most ideal form that offers managers the most control over fire behavior and reaching desired fire effects, but it's also the most difficult to apply given the number of constraints. But it's the clearest evidence of the declining fire exclusion paradigm is a near widespread consensus within the fire management community about the need for prescribed fire. But the best is the least done. Suppression fire use, probably the most extensive kind of fire use, and want to challenge that assumption that fire suppression equals fire exclusion, because just speaking from my own experience as a wildland firefighter, I put in a lot more fire than I ever put out. It came with our backfire and burnout operations. We had a mantra: first we light them, then we fight them. We put out a lot of the fires we put in. And fighting fire with fire in the form of backfires and burnouts, this is really where a lot of fire is being put on the ground, but often in the kind of worst times, places, conditions for controlling fire behavior or fire effects. It's an open question. What are they really doing on the landscape? And occasionally backfires can backfire in fire crews, including the 2000 Cerro Grande fire. And many people wrongly blame the Park Service as prescribed fire. It slopped over about 30 acres, but the backfire burned across 48,000 acres. And then in some cases, they're putting out wildfires or putting out prescribed fires to eliminate smoke, but that's another paradox. Fighting fire with fire to put out smoke means you're putting out smoke, a lot more smoke, as in many cases we've seen. The last kind of fire use is restoration fire use. And this is where we're most explicit about managing wildfire for resource or ecosystem benefits. But in a study I've done with a colleague, Mike Beasley, this is in the Park Stewardship Forum, we found just in analyzing 3 Forest Service regions over 2 fire seasons, it's just way behind. Varies widely by the agency and by the region and unit, and Region 5 in particular is way behind taking advantage of opportunities for fire use. So our proposal is, let's call it ecological fire use, where we're working with wildland fire to maximize socio-ecological objectives, mitigate risks and hazards to people and property, minimize costs and impacts of conventional fire suppression actions. Ecological fire use, I think, is even more clear than prescribed natural fire about what we're doing and why. And I want to stress that it's not let burn, it's active management, even monitoring actions. These should be used as opportunities to record data in real time, ground truth or models, integrate perhaps some research questions in fire management, increase their fire ecology knowledge, actively watch, actively learn. Ecological fire use is active management. And of course, crews are standing by, prepared to take further actions if necessary. Maybe we should resurrect loose herding. The term loose herding fires, fire guiding instead of firefighting. We're more out to steer the fire, slow it down or speed it up as needs are revealed or whatever. Not always trying to stop fire, put it out. Working with natural fire breaks and barriers, a channel, confine fire within fire sheds. Some of these innovative strategies like point protection rather than perimeter control. And along with new words and terms, phrases for ecological fire use, we're going to require new terms for fire management crews. They're not going to be firefighters, but perhaps fire guiders or fire lighters, conveying that they're more workers and warriors, stewards than soldiers, And so our proposal is to call these fire management crews fire rangers for many reasons. And I'm running out of time. So to sum it up, ecological fire use is the proposed term for fire use. No acronym. Don't start labeling EFU because it's going to be pronounced FU. And that's not socially acceptable either. But calling ecological fire use will make it more explicit, and our actions and intentions were out for multiple ecological restoration or resilience or regeneration objectives, which includes firefighter safety, community protection, resource benefits, and ecosystem restoration. Multiple objectives, multiple goals in ecological fire use. Thanks for listening, and please, if you have success stories about managing fire for multiple objectives and you were not able to tout that success, send it to us. We'll put it out there, and we really need to cultivate a public constituency for ecological fire management, and that means including fire ecology in fire management, each and every action. Thank you so much, folks. Enjoy the rest of the Fire Congress. I'll see you there.